The Mineral Washington murders, infamously known as the tubsock killings, is a brutal incident that occurred in 1985 across the remote wilderness areas of Lewis and Pierce County. The moniker tubsock killings derives from the distinctive signature left at multiple crime scenes, tube socks tied around the necks of female victims. The first incident involved Stephen Harkins and Ruth Cooper. Stephen was a 27-year-old truck driver who had spent his entire life in Tacoma, Washington. Ruth Cooper, 42, originally from Portland, Oregon, had moved to Tacoma approximately 6 years before the murders, around 1979. She was a skilled machinist as well as a devoted mother to 5 children from previous relationships. At the time, the couple had been together for 3 years. The events of Saturday, August 10th, 1985 began with what should have been a joyful celebration, with the couple attended a friend's wedding reception in Tacoma. Following the reception that evening, Stephen and Ruth made the decision to embark on a camping trip to Tule Lake in Pierce County. This decision appeared to be somewhat spontaneous, as there is no evidence they had extensively planned the camping expedition in advance. The lake is situated in a region covered by dense forests, rolling hills, and scattered small lakes that dot the landscape between the major metropolitan areas and the Cascade foothills. At some point late that night or early on Sunday, August 11th, the two were murdered. Stephen's body was discovered still lying in his sleeping bag, indicating that he was likely still asleep when the attack was carried out. It was determined that he had died via a single shot to the head. Furthermore, the couple had brought along their dog on this trip, which was also found dead several hundred yards away, suffering the same wound as Stephen. Ruth's fate during this initial attack remains partially unclear, but evidence suggests she survived the initial assault and was taken from the campsite by force. The fact that many of her personal belongings, including her shoes, were left at the campsite indicates her removal was sudden and violent, giving her no time to gather possessions. The discovery of Stephen's body was made by a local resident named Walter Funk, who became concerned about an abandoned vehicle. Walter Funk, a 72-year-old local man familiar with the area's normal patterns of activity, first noticed a Volkswagen station wagon in the camping area on Monday, August 12th. It wasn't until August 14th that he approached the vehicle to investigate, and that's when he noticed Stephen's lifeless body next to the vehicle. Notably, Stephen's wallet and other valuables were not taken, and there were no signs of the campsite being ransacked for money or equipment. As for Ruth's disappearance, it created an immediate and intensive search operation. However, she would remain missing for 2 months. The breakthrough in locating her came on October 26, 1985. When 2 hunters walking in the area near the dead end of 8th Avenue South, close to Hart's Lake, discovered Ruth's lifeless body. The hunters first discovered a skull along with long black hair, approximately 1.5 miles from where Stephen's body had been found at the original campsite. 2 days later, search and rescue teams conducted a more intensive search of the area around where Ruth's skull had been found. This effort located the rest of her body and her purse approximately 50 feet from where her skull had been discovered. The most significant and ultimately case-defining discovery was the tube sock that had been tied around Ruth's neck. This piece of evidence would become the signature element that linked Ruth's murder to the subsequent Diana Robertson case, ultimately giving the series of crimes their collective name as the tubsock killings. The tubsock was described as a white, stretchy, knee-high sock, approximately 3 feet in length with navy blue rings around the top. It was not new and showed signs of previous wear. Despite the apparent strangulation method suggested by the tube sock around her neck, the autopsy revealed that Ruth had actually died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen, not from strangulation. This finding indicated that the tube sock served a purpose other than killing Ruth, most likely as a restraint or control device during assault, or simply as a signature left by the perpetrator. As mentioned, these 2 murders were later tied to that of Diana Robertson as well as Mike Reamer. I've already gone over that particular case, so I won't be spending much time on it. But the gist of that case was that Diana was found dead in a forested area of Washington, while Mike was nowhere to be seen. She too was found with a tube sock tied around her neck. For a period of time, it was commonly theorized that Mike was responsible for his partner's murder, but over 2 decades later in 2011, Mike's remains were found by a property manager searching his 20-acre plot of land. Based on other evidence found alongside his remains, Mike was effectively eliminated from suspicion of being responsible for Diana's death. However, it should be mentioned that there is still DNA testing being conducted with Mike's teeth, as well as DNA from the sock found with Diana. Critically, forensic analysis revealed that the tube socks from both Diana and Ruth's cases were not from the same manufacturing batch, indicating they likely came from different sources. This finding raised questions about whether the cases were truly connected or if the similar methodology was coincidental. The prevailing theory among many investigators and amateur sleuths suggests an unknown serial killer was responsible for all 4 murders. This theory is supported by geographic clustering, as all murders occurred within the same general wilderness area near Mineral, Washington. The proximity in timing is also significant, with the murders happening within a 4-month period from August to December 1985. Both incidents involved couples in remote outdoor settings, and the tube sock methodology appeared in both female victims. Additionally, in both cases, male and female victims were found at different locations. Some investigators and experts question whether the cases are definitively connected. Lewis County Detective Pat Beal expressed skepticism about the connection, noting that the tube socks weren't from the same batch and the murders might be coincidental rather than the work of a single killer. Arguments against the serial killer theory include different methodologies, as Ruth Cooper was shot while Diana Robertson was stabbed. The crime scene presentations also differed, with the Stephen and Ruth scene appearing more organized while the Mike and Diana scene showed signs of rough domestic violence. Additionally, Mike's documented domestic violence pattern provided a clear motive for Diana's murder. Initially, investigators attempted to connect the tube sock killings to the murders of Edward Smith and Kimberly Levine, who were killed in March 1985 in Grant County. However, this case was definitively solved in 1989 when fingerprint evidence led to the conviction of Billy Ray Ballard Jr., a truck driver who pleaded guilty to both murders. Both the Lewis County and Pierce County Sheriff's Departments maintain these as active cold cases. Investigators continue to review evidence and consider new leads, particularly as DNA technology continues to advance. However, no major breakthroughs have been publicly announced as of 2025. The Zanfretta UFO incident is one of the most extensively documented and controversial cases of alleged alien abduction in European history. Between 1978 and 1981, Pier Fortunato Zanfretta, a 26-year-old Italian security guard, claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrial beings no fewer than 11 separate times. What distinguishes this case from other UFO encounters is not merely the repeated nature of the abductions, but the high level of official investigation, witness testimony, physical evidence collection, and medical examination that surrounded these claims. On the night of December 6, 1978, Zanfretta was conducting a routine patrol through the hills of Torriglia, a village approximately 20 kilometers northeast of Genoa. As a night watchman, he had made the same patrol countless times without incident. However, as he approached the isolated Villa Casa Nostra belonging to Dr. Ettore Righi at approximately 11:30 p.m., he found himself in a life-altering event. As Zanfretta navigated the ice-covered mountain roads in his patrol car, the vehicle's engine, radio, and lights simultaneously malfunctioned and died completely. Initially assuming mechanical failure, he noticed 4 distinct lights moving through the garden of the villa. His first instinct as a security guard was that burglars were attempting to break into the property and he was seeing their flashlights. Armed with his service revolver and flashlight, Zanfretta quietly exited his disabled vehicle and climbed through the property's gate. He crept along a stone wall, preparing to confront what he believed were ordinary criminals. However, as he positioned himself to surprise the intruders, something touched his shoulder from behind. When he spun around, his flashlight illuminated not a human burglar, but what he described as a, quote, enormous green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin as though it were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic. It was less than 10 feet tall. The being possessed mottled, reptilian-like skin, triangular yellow eyes that glowed, clawed appendages on both hands and feet, and thorny protrusions extending from its head. Furthermore, the creature's mouth area contained what appeared to be a mechanical breathing apparatus with metallic components. In a state of shock, he dropped his flashlight but managed to retrieve it and flee toward his car. As he ran, a bright triangular light began rising from behind the villa, ascending with a distinctive hissing sound. The massive craft, which Zanfretta estimated exceeded the house in size, emitted a searing wave of heat that nearly knocked him to the ground. Despite his terror, he managed to reach his vehicle and immediately radioed his security company's operations center. At precisely 12:15 a.m., radio operator Carlo Toccolino received Zanfretta's panicked transmission. Carlo later testified that Zanfretta was speaking in an incoherent, agitated manner, describing bizarre, inhuman beings. When asked who was attacking him, Zanfretta's responded with, "No, they aren't men, they aren't men. My God, they are so ugly." Communication was then abruptly severed, prompting Carlo to alert Lieutenant Giovanni Casiba, who immediately dispatched a second patrol. Due to the hazardous road conditions, the backup team of guards Walter Lauria and Raimondo Mascia did not reach the scene until approximately 1:15 a.m. They discovered Zanfretta lying unconscious on the ground in front of the villa. When he saw the approaching guards, he leaped to his feet in terror, pointing both his loaded pistol and flashlight at his colleagues, appearing not to recognize them. The guards were forced to rush and disarm him to prevent potential casualties. Interestingly, despite lying on frozen ground for over an hour in sub-freezing temperatures, Zanfretta's clothing was inexplicably warm to the touch. The severity and unusual nature of the incident prompted an immediate investigation by the Italian military police. Brigadier Antonio Nucci, commandant of the Torriglia station, who had known Zanfretta for years, led the official investigation. They discovered compelling physical evidence that supported Zanfretta's extraordinary claims. The most significant discoveries included 2 large, horseshoe-shaped impressions in the frost-covered ground behind the villa, measuring approximately 9 feet in diameter and pressed 3 centimeters deep into the soil. The markings appeared consistent with the landing gear from a large aircraft. Additionally, investigators found evidence of Zanfretta having fired his weapon, though he had no memory of doing so. Antonio Nucci, who had supervised Zanfretta for years, provided a character assessment when asked about the possibility that Zanfretta was making the interaction up. Antonio said, "I can state with certainty that he is a clear-thinking man with no strange fantasies in his head. When we went to investigate the scene the next day, he almost didn't want to come. He was so scared. Only something exceptional could have frightened him so." Similarly, Gianfranco Tutti, director of the security company employing Zanfretta, publicly affirmed his belief in the guard's honesty, despite concerns about potential negative publicity for his business. On December 23, 1978, 17 days after the initial encounter, journalist Rino Di Stefano from the Corriere Mercantile newspaper arranged for Zanfretta to undergo regressive hypnosis. The session was conducted by Dr. Mauro Moretti, a respected psychotherapist and member of the Italian Association of Medical Hypnosis, ensuring professional credibility. Under hypnosis, Zanfretta revealed previously suppressed memories of the encounter. He described it being taken aboard the alien craft into what he characterized as a hot, luminous location. During this abduction, the beings conducted thorough medical examinations and interrogations. The creatures communicated not through speech, but via a device that translated their thoughts into concepts that could be comprehended. Most significantly, the aliens identified themselves as originating from a planet called Titonia, located in the Third Galaxy. They expressed a desire to establish communication with humanity and ominously warned that, quote, they will soon return in larger numbers. Dr. Moretti later stated that while he personally found the story unbelievable, all objective professional indicators suggested the recounting were genuine beliefs without any deception. Merely 3 days after his first hypnosis session on December 26th, Zanfretta reported another abduction while driving through the Bargagli tunnel near Scofera Pass at 11:45 p.m. He claimed his patrol car suddenly began driving autonomously, beyond his control. Despite desperate attempts to engage the brakes and steering, the vehicle traveled approximately 1 mile before stopping abruptly, causing Zanfretta to strike his head against the steering wheel. The car was then enveloped in a white light. Radio operator Carlo recorded Zanfretta's transmission, delivered in what he described as a strangely calm, trance-like voice. He said, "The car has stopped. I saw a bright light. Now I am getting out. They say I must leave with them." When rescue teams arrived at 1:10 a.m., they discovered Zanfretta in a nearby field. Despite continuous rainfall, his clothes were completely dry and warm. More disturbing was his emotional state. He was found trembling and weeping, declaring, "They say I must leave with them. What about my children? I don't want to. I don't want to." The Carabinieri investigation of this second incident uncovered additional physical evidence. The roof and interior of Zanfretta's car were found to be extremely hot, described as hot as an oven, despite prolonged exposure to cold rain. Surrounding the vehicle were enormous footprints measuring 20 inches long by 8 inches wide, with a distinctive gap between the sole and heel. Zanfretta's service revolver was discovered with 5 rounds fired, though he retained no memory of using his weapon yet again. On July 30th, 1979, another interesting development occurred. Zanfretta vanished for 2 hours during a motorcycle patrol near Mount Foch. His disappearance was particularly puzzling because the mountain location was accessible only by a single narrow road surrounded by local residents. When questioned, no witnesses recalled seeing Zanfretta or his motorcycle travel up this road during the time period of his disappearance. This suggested he had been transported to the location by other means. Following this third incident, Zanfretta underwent hypnotic regression at the International Center of Medical and Psychological Hypnosis in Milan. This session was conducted under more rigorous conditions and included the administration of sodium pentothal, sometimes referred to as truth serum. Under the influence of sodium pentothal, Zanfretta maintained his claims of alien contact, describing being lifted from the ground by a mysterious green light and transported aboard a spacecraft. Officials overseeing the session said, "No human being can knowingly lie while he is under pentothal treatment, so I think it's very probable Zanfretta had these encounters." The most compelling evidence for these experiences occurred on December 2nd, 1979, when his disappearance involved multiple independent witnesses with tragic consequences. At approximately 10:30 p.m., while patrolling the suburbs of Genoa in an Austin Mini, Zanfretta again vanished from radio contact. 4 security guards in a patrol vehicle were searching the mountainous terrain for their missing colleague when a cloud-like object suddenly appeared above them. 2 columns of light descended from the craft, illuminating their vehicle and the surrounding area with intense white light. Simultaneously, their car's engine stalled and all electrical systems failed. The 4 guards exited their vehicle to observe the phenomenon more closely. Lieutenant Kasiba, apparently terrified by what he witnessed, fired his pistol at the unknown craft. The lights immediately extinguished and the object disappeared as rapidly as it had appeared. This encounter would go on to have a devastating psychological impact on Germano Zanardi, one of the 4 guards. He never recovered from the traumatic experience and took his own life several months later. The following evening, December 3rd, 1979, Zanfretta experienced another bizarre encounter while refueling his patrol car at a service station near downtown Genoa. He heard someone calling his name from the shadows outside the station. When he investigated, he observed a tall, humanoid figure with a distinctive egg-shaped bald head, dressed in a checkered suit with a metallic chestplate where a shirt should have been. This description bears striking similarities to accounts of Men in Black and the Grinning Man phenomena documented by paranormal researcher John Keel. Zanfretta claimed the entity's voice possessed an irresistible compulsive quality that forced him to obey without question. The being instructed him to drive his vehicle into a nearby hovering cloud. Following these instructions, Zanfretta reported that his car was levitated into the cloud and deposited aboard a massive spacecraft. During this encounter, he was allowed to explore the craft in the company of the tall reptilian beings he had previously encountered. He observed large, transparent cylindrical containers filled with blue liquid, one of which contained a frog-shaped creature that his hosts identified as an enemy of ours from another planet. Other containers held a large bird-like creature and a humanoid figure resembling a caveman. During this extended encounter, the aliens attempted to present Zanfretta with a transparent sphere containing what appeared to be an electrically charged pyramid. They claimed this device would enable humans to understand their civilization and way of life. When Zanfretta refused the gift, stating he had enough of all these strange encounters and wished only to go back to his normal life, the beings insisted he accept it and deliver it to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the renowned American astronomer and UFO researcher. Oddly, Zanfretta claims to have accepted the alien artifact, but rather than delivering it to Dr. Hynek as instructed, he allegedly hid the object somewhere in the hills near Genoa. To this day, the location of this alleged extraterrestrial technology remains unknown. There are several additional encounters that Zanfretta claimed to have had, but I believe you all get the idea by now. More than 4 decades after the initial encounter, this case remains one of the most thoroughly documented alleged alien contact cases in Europe. The combination of multiple independent witnesses, official police investigations, physical evidence collection, medical examinations, and consistent testimony under various conditions of psychological evaluation creates a uniquely comprehensive record. Whether viewed as genuine evidence of extraterrestrial contact or simply as a fascinating tale in psychology, the Zanfretta incident continues to intrigue enthusiasts and skeptics alike. The Worst Movie Ever from 2011 is a film that achieved legendary status because it failed so spectacularly at the box office. Created by Glenn Burgitz through his company Driving With Our Eyes Shut Productions, this action comedy was produced on a minuscule budget of just $1,100. The film runs 76 minutes and deliberately embraces the conventions of B-movie filmmaking with an intentionally absurd premise. The story involves a suburban neighborhood being invaded by stereotypes from horror films, featuring a cast of characters including a robot alien named Boltar, angst-ridden teenagers played by adults, cleavage-wielding soul-takers, a dark overlord, and appearances by Santa Claus and Abraham Lincoln. Glenn himself plays multiple roles, portraying Johnny, Dr. Lars Kuhlman, and Petey. The film had its world premiere at the inaugural Van Wert Independent Film Festival in Van Wert, Ohio on July 8, 2011. This festival was designed to showcase independent and student films while bringing tourism dollars to Northwest Ohio. Glenn served as one of the featured speakers at the festival's breakfast symposium and hosted a midnight screening of his film. The festival also included screenings of other independent films and concluded with an award ceremony at the Van Wert Banquet Hall and Convention Center. The film's entry into cinema history occurred through a series of unexpected events that began 6 weeks before the Los Angeles premiere. Glenn received an unsolicited email from the Laemmle Sunset 5 Theater offering him last-minute screening slots for the weekend of August 19th and 20th. The theater had a successful tradition of showing notoriously awful cult films like The Room on the final weekend of each month, and they were seeking content for their second to last weekend slot. Assuming that simply appearing on a Los Angeles theater marquee would naturally attract curious moviegoers, Glenn eagerly accepted the opportunity. However, the film was not actually listed on the theater's marquee, and it was scheduled as part of the theater's monthly midnight screening series, factors that severely limited its visibility to potential audiences. The results were historically dismal. Over the course of 2 nights, the film attracted 0 paying customers on Friday night and exactly 1 anonymous ticket purchaser on Saturday night, generating a total opening weekend gross of $11. This single ticket purchase established a new record for the lowest opening weekend gross in film history, surpassing the previous record holder, Zizek's Road from 2006, which had earned $30 from 6 patrons during its opening week. On Monday, August 22nd, 2011, Glenn called the theater to inquire about the weekend's performance. As he had previously promised a contact at Box Office Mojo to report the film's gross, he dutifully submitted the embarrassing figure. The Box Office Mojo representative initially questioned whether the $11 figure was an input error, but upon confirmation informed Glenn that he had established a new record for lowest opening weekend in cinema history. The mystery in this entry primarily revolves around the identity of the single person who purchased the ticket for the screening. This moviegoer, whose identity remains unknown more than a decade later, holds a unique significance as the only person to witness the film's theatrical premiere in its intended commercial context. Theater owner Greg Lemley expressed curiosity about the individual's identity, stating, "We're anxious to find out as well. We need proof." Glenn said he's already had a few people claim that they were the ones. "I think we need a ticket stub here." Glenn has similarly expressed interest in learning the viewer's identity, noting, "I would be thrilled to know who it was who attended the screening so I can put him or her in my will." Since the story gained media attention, several individuals have claimed to be the mysterious ticket purchaser, but none have been able to produce the actual ticket stub to verify. This lack of concrete evidence has only deepened the mystery and elevated the unknown viewer to mythical status within film circles. The circumstances of their attendance raise additional questions. Did they have advanced knowledge of the film? Were they a supporter of independent cinema, a casual moviegoer seeking entertainment, or someone with a specific interest in intentionally poor films? Most intriguingly, did they remain for the entire 76-minute runtime, or did they leave upon realizing that the film was not going to be good? The Colonial Parkway murders is a series of brutal attacks targeting young couples that terrorized the Tidewater region of Virginia between 1986 and 1989. The case derives its name from the Colonial Parkway, a scenic 22-mile thoroughfare that cuts through Virginia's Colonial National Historical Park, connecting the triangle of Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. The Colonial Parkway serves as both a tourist destination and a lover's lane, offering breathtaking scenery during daylight hours, but transforming into isolated, dangerous terrain after dark. The road's design, with limited entries and exits compared to typical highways, created perfect conditions for criminal activity, as victims could be easily trapped with minimal escape routes. The Parkway's designation as federal property would later complicate jurisdictional issues during the investigation. The killing began on October 9, 1986, when 27-year-old Kathleen Thomas and 21-year-old Rebecca Dowski disappeared after leaving a computer lab around 6:30 p.m. Thomas, a member of the United States Naval Academy's second class to admit women, had recently left the Navy after being investigated by 9 agents regarding her sexuality, since homosexuals were banned from military service at that time. She had transitioned to a successful career as a stockbroker and was in a committed relationship with Dowski, who worked 2 jobs while studying business management at the College of William and Mary. On October 12, 1986, a jogger discovered Thomas's white 1980 Honda Civic at the bottom of an embankment at the Cheatham Annex Overlook, approximately 7 miles east of Williamsburg. The vehicle had been pushed off the Colonial Parkway into thick shrubbery, just feet from a 15-foot drop into the York River. Inside, investigators found both women's bodies in a horrific state. They had been bound with rope, strangled, and their throats slashed so deeply they were nearly decapitated. The killer had attempted to destroy evidence by dousing the car and bodies with diesel fuel, but the fuel failed to ignite. Remarkably, over 100 fingerprints were found on the vehicle's interior and exterior, but none matched anyone in police records. Both women were fully clothed with no evidence of assault, and their purses remained in the vehicle with money and jewelry intact, ruling out robbery as a motive. Thomas's body was stuffed in the hatchback, while Dowski's was found in the back seat. A clump of hair found between Thomas's fingers indicated she had fought her attacker. Nearly 11 months later, on September 19, 1987, the killer struck again with 20-year-old David Nobbling and 14-year-old Robin Edwards. David, a salesman who worked for his father's landscaping business, had driven his younger cousin and Edwards to see the film Dragnet that evening. Edwards, who had been struggling with mental health issues but was making remarkable progress through therapy, snuck out of her home around midnight to meet David. On September 21st, 1987, a patrolman discovered David's black Ford Ranger pickup truck at the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge parking area in Isle of Wight County. The scene was eerily suspicious, with both doors open, driver's side window partially rolled down, and the engine, radio, and windshield wipers still running. Inside the truck were folded clothes, including underwear from both victims, and David's wallet remained on the dashboard, again ruling out robbery. 2 days later, on September 23rd, both bodies washed ashore on the James River bank, approximately 100 feet apart. Edwards had been shot execution style in the back of the head, while David suffered gunshot wounds to both his head and shoulder, suggesting he may have attempted to flee. Edwards was found partially clothed with her jeans unfastened and bra around her neck. Investigators initially couldn't determine if assault had occurred, but state police later confirmed Edwards had been assaulted. The partially rolled down window suggested to investigators that the perpetrator might have been posing as a uniformed officer. This was significant because David never left his truck unlocked and always backed into parking spaces, yet the vehicle was found parked by driving forward. Additionally, David had wired his radio directly to the battery, eliminating the need to set the ignition to accessories as it was found. On April 9th, 1988, Christopher Newport University students 20-year-old Richard Call and 18-year-old Cassandra Haley went on their first date together. Call, a computer science major, described as an old soul who loved washing his red 1982 Toyota Celica, had asked out Haley, a college freshman who modeled and taught gymnastics. They saw a movie and later went to a party in the University Square area, where witnesses saw them socializing separately before leaving together sometime between 11:30 p.m. and 2:25 a.m. The following day, Call's Toyota Celica was discovered at the York River Overlook in Yorktown, just a few miles from where Thomas and Dowski had been murdered. The driver's door stood open with keys on the driver's seat and Call's gold wristwatch and eyeglasses left on the dashboard. Nearly all the clothing both victims had worn that evening was found in the back seat, along with personal items. Mysteriously, only Haley's wallet was missing from her purse, while Call's wallet remained in the vehicle. Police dogs tracked the couple's scent from the car to the nearby York River shoreline, where the dogs attempted to enter the water. Despite extensive searches of the river and surrounding area, neither body has ever been recovered and they remain missing and presumed dead. The couple's disappearance was particularly puzzling because both families reported that Call and Haley had expressed fear of the Colonial Parkway at nighttime since it was dark and isolated, and that they would never have voluntarily parked there. The final confirmed attack occurred on September 4th, 1989, involving 18-year-old Anna Maria Phelps and 21-year-old Daniel Lauer. Interestingly, this pair was not romantically involved. Phelps was dating Lauer's younger brother Clint and lived with him in Virginia Beach. Due to financial difficulties, Lauer had agreed to move in with the couple to help with expenses and needed to return to Amelia County to collect his belongings. Phelps accompanied him on the trip to visit her own family. They left Amelia County around 11:15 p.m. on September 4th, traveling eastbound on Interstate 64 in Lauer's 1973 gold Chevrolet Nova, bound for Virginia Beach. When they failed to arrive at their destination, family members contacted police. On September 5th, Lauer's vehicle was discovered abandoned at a westbound rest area on Interstate 64 in New Kent County. Puzzlingly, this was the opposite direction from their intended route. The car was parked in a way that partially blocked a lane designated for large trucks, with both doors unlocked and keys still in the ignition. Police found dirt and grass stains on the vehicle's underside, suggesting it had recently been driven through wooded areas. A feathered roach clip that Lauer typically kept attached to the rearview mirror had been moved to the driver's side mirror. Phelps's purse was found inside the car, again ruling out robbery. On October 19th, 1989, hunters discovered the skeletal remains of both victims wrapped in an electric blanket from Lauer's car, located in woods approximately 3 miles east of the rest stop. The advanced state of decomposition made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, though some of Phelps's bones showed possible evidence of stabbing. This marked the first case where stab wounds were potentially identified as the cause of death. In 2010, investigators discovered a previously overlooked note in Phelps's apartment, apparently written by her before the trip. The undated note indicated she was planning to meet someone in a blue van at a rest stop, providing a name and phone number. This discovery reignited interest in the case, as the location mentioned in the note was near where their bodies were eventually found. After more than 3 decades of investigation, Virginia State Police announced a significant breakthrough on January 8, 2024. DNA evidence conclusively linked Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., a deceased local fisherman, to the murders of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, as well as the previously unconnected 1989 strangulation death of Teresa Lynn Howell in Hampton. Wilmer, who died in December 2017 at age 63, was a local waterman who operated his own boat, the Denny Wade, primarily harvesting clams and oysters. He later started a tree cutting company called Better Tree Service. Standing 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing approximately 165 pounds, Wilmer was known by the nickname Pokey. Importantly, Wilmer drove a distinctive blue 1966 Dodge Fargo pickup truck with the vanity license plate M. Raw. He often lived on his fishing boat while it was docked at marinas along southeastern Virginia's waterways. Wilmer was an avid hunter, member of a local hunting club, and won archery competitions. He married on February 22, 1975, later divorced, and had 2 adult children at the time of his death. Wilmer had no prior felony convictions, which meant his DNA was never entered into law enforcement databases during his lifetime. Only after his death in 2017 were investigators able to obtain his genetic profile posthumously for comparison with evidence from the crime scenes. As mentioned, the DNA evidence also linked Wilmer to the July 1st, 1989 murder of Teresa Howell, age 29, who was found assaulted and strangled at a Hampton construction site approximately 7 hours after leaving the popular Zodiac Club nightclub. Unironically, Wilmer had been a longtime suspect in the Colonial Parkway murders, particularly the Keith Call and Cassandra Haley case. During the 1988 investigation, the FBI became aware of a fisherman in a pickup truck who had approached at least one other couple on the Colonial Parkway around the time of the Call and Haley disappearance. Investigators placed Wilmer under surveillance and observed him cleaning and spray painting his pickup truck. The FBI executed a search warrant of Wilmer's home, discovering handcuffs and a gun. However, an FBI polygraph examiner cleared him and he was subsequently released. Despite this, he remained the FBI's prime suspect in the case. Law enforcement officials now strongly suggest Wilmer may have been responsible for their disappearance as well, though DNA evidence has not yet confirmed this connection. Aside from Wilmer, during the early stages of the investigation, authorities suspected the perpetrator might be connected to law enforcement. Multiple pieces of evidence supported this theory. Thomas's wallet had been removed from her purse and placed where it could be easily seen, as if she had been preparing to show identification. Just days after the first murders, the FBI privately suggested to victim families that the perpetrator might be a member of law enforcement. The positioning of vehicles and evidence at crime scenes suggested the killer had knowledge of police procedures and forensic investigation techniques. In the Knobling Edwards case, the partially rolled down window led investigators to believe victims may have complied with what appeared to be an official traffic stop. The sophisticated crime scene staging and the killer's ability to avoid leaving usable forensic evidence further supported this theory. Some criminal profilers, including Larry McCann of the Virginia State Police Behavioral Science Unit and Irvin Wells of the FBI, believed the crimes required coordination between 2 offenders. They argued that the level of control demonstrated over 2 victims simultaneously suggested a partnership with one dominant and one submissive participant. This theory was based on the practical challenges of controlling 2 victims while maintaining the sophisticated crime scene staging observed across multiple cases. The perpetrators had to stop victims' vehicles, maintain control over both individuals, sometimes get them to undress, transport them to secondary locations, and stage elaborate crime scenes, all while avoiding detection. McCann theorized that if two people were working together, the killing may have stopped because the dominant partner either killed the subordinate partner or the subordinate partner died through other means. This could explain why no similar crimes occurred elsewhere after 1989, as the remaining perpetrator would not have been capable of continuing alone. As of 2025, the Colonial Parkway murders remain active investigations handled by multiple law enforcement agencies. Following Wilmer's identification, investigators are working to determine if his DNA can be linked to the other murders. The investigation remains focused on reconstructing his movements and activities during the 1980s and seeking additional witnesses who knew him. The disappearance of Kevin J. Ayotte is a missing child case that occurred on September 30th, 1982, where a 3-year-old boy with developmental disabilities vanished from his family's summer cabin in a matter of minutes. This went on to trigger one of the largest search operations in Minnesota history. Despite extensive efforts involving hundreds of volunteers, multiple law enforcement agencies, and sophisticated search techniques, Kevin was never found. More than 4 decades later, his fate remains unknown. Kevin was born on May 12, 1979. He lived with his mother Joanne and 2 older brothers, 9-year-old Terry and 7-year-old Jamie, in what appears to have been a single-parent household. The family maintained a summer cabin in Sugarbush Township, Minnesota, located in a remote, heavily wooded area approximately 16 to 18 miles east or northeast of Bemidji. Kevin was developmentally disabled and had a severe hearing impairment that resulted in extremely limited speech capabilities. Sources consistently describe him as either nonverbal or nearly nonverbal. At the time of his disappearance, Kevin stood 4 feet tall and weighed 50 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. He had a distinctive scar on the right side of his chin, described as a cleft chin. Crucially, he had a documented history of wandering away from home, though he had always returned after brief periods. This pattern of temporary disappearances would later complicate the family's initial response and investigators' assessment of the situation. The behavior was not considered particularly alarming by the family, as Kevin invariably came back on his own. September 30th, 1982 began as what appeared to be a typical day at the family's cabin. According to the most consistent accounts from multiple sources, Kevin was last seen at approximately 4:45 p.m. playing in the upstairs area of the cabin. Specifically, he was in his mother's bedroom playing with toys, while his brother Terry was in another upstairs room making his bed. Terry later recalled that Kevin had actually helped him make his bed before going to their mother's room to continue playing. Joanne was downstairs at the time, tending to various household chores. At some point, she stepped outside briefly. Sources vary, but it seems that she was gone for no more than several minutes. When Joanne returned inside, she discovered that Kevin had vanished. Terry, who was still upstairs, went to check on his younger brother and found the bedroom empty. He immediately went downstairs to ask his mother if she had seen Kevin, but she had not. The family's immediate response was to search the house and surrounding yard before contacting relatives to assist in the search. When these initial efforts proved fruitless, Joanne contacted police at 7 p.m. to report Kevin missing. A critical and unusual aspect of Kevin's disappearance was the simultaneous vanishing of the family's 6-month-old Springer Spaniel puppy named Flash. The dog's disappearance alongside Kevin raised immediate questions about what had occurred. The mystery deepened significantly on October 5th, 1982, when Flash returned home after being missing for 5 days. The dog's return provided investigators with their first potential breakthrough, and they subjected Flash to thorough examination in hopes of discovering clues about Kevin's whereabouts. Investigators combed through Flash's coat meticulously, searching for any physical evidence that might indicate where the dog had been during its absence. More significantly, a veterinarian pumped the dog's stomach to analyze its contents. The examination revealed that Flash had eaten virtually nothing during the 5 days it was missing, except for swamp grass. In a desperate attempt to locate Kevin, police fitted Flash with a tracking collar and released the dog at various locations, hoping it would lead them back to wherever Kevin might be. However, these efforts proved futile as Flash consistently returned home without providing any additional leads. The tracking collar experiment was repeated multiple times with the same disappointing results. Over the course of 9 days, more than 500 volunteers participated in the search efforts at various times. The search utilized every available resource and technology of the era. But despite the massive effort, the search yielded no trace of Kevin. Investigators found no clothing, no shoes, no diaper, and no other personal items. After 9 days of searching, officials made the difficult decision to discontinue active search efforts. Investigators conducted extensive interviews with neighbors and known offenders in the area. They explored every possible lead and tip, with investigations eventually taking Beltrami County Sheriff's Office personnel from coast to coast over the years. The case file grew to contain thousands of items spanning multiple decades. Initially, investigators entertained the idea that a family member may have taken Kevin, but have since shifted their stance to believe that a non-family member may have been responsible. That is, if another individual is involved in the first place. Over the 4 decades since Kevin's disappearance, several theories have emerged to explain what might have happened. The primary one being that he may have just gotten lost in the woods and died from exposure or drowning in one of the area's many water sources. The challenging terrain with its bogs, rivers, and lakes could conceal a small child's remains. However, this theory struggles to explain the complete absence of any physical evidence despite extensive search efforts involving hundreds of people. Another possibility considered is animal predation. Northern Minnesota's wilderness is home to bears, wolves, and other predators that could potentially explain both Kevin's disappearance and the lack of remains. However, this theory doesn't adequately explain how the family puppy survived and returned home unharmed, or why no clothing or other evidence was ever found. The official classification as a non-family abduction reflects investigators' belief that Kevin was likely taken by someone unknown to the family. The timing, disappearing within minutes while his mother was briefly outside, suggests either careful planning by someone familiar with the family's routines or an opportunistic crime. The simultaneous disappearance of Flash could indicate that someone took both the child and dog, with Flash later escaping or being released. It's also possible that Kevin initially wandered off, as he had before, but then encountered someone who took him, or that he became lost and died, but in an area that wasn't adequately searched or where remains were not preserved.